Hi guys, it is Lizzy with the House of Timber, and I want to do a full coverage intro to scrolling. So all of the questions like what material should I be using, where do you get your templates, how do you apply your templates, how do you get those inner cuts, I'm going to walk you through all of that. And when you are done with this, you should have all of the knowledge to be making product like this. So let's get started with that. First thing is material choice. So don't feel limited because you're using a scroll saw. You can cut almost anything on that thing, but beginner basics, and honestly, things that I prefer to use even still, are MDF and Baltic birch. So this is birch plywood. You can see there are 3 main layers in that. And the difference in Baltic birch is, I can't even count. There's probably 10 layers in the same thickness of material. So this is very dense. You're not going to find any holes or divots that you would find scrolling regular plywood. So if actual wood is your preference, say you want to stain your letters or do something like that, I would be leaning towards Baltic birch for that purpose. For my painted lettering, I love using MDF. Now, what you've heard is true. It's kind of a nasty material, but I always wear a mask when I'm using it. It comes in multiple thicknesses, so 1/4 inch. I've got some 1/8 inch here, and my favorite is the 3/8. And this I actually find from a hardwood supplier. So this again is different than what you find on the Lowe's or Home Depot big box store shelf. There are multiple qualities of MDF, and my best advice for you is when you're getting started, don't just settle for the box store MDF. Call around, go to a cabinet supplier, a hardwood store, and get you the higher grade of MDF. And you're going to have much better luck when it comes to painting that material. So another frequent question is what blade should I be using? And the information on the package can look a bit confusing, but the one part to focus on is number 1, number 3, number 5, number 7, number 9. That's the number you want to be focusing on. And if you're using a number 1, it is much finer than a number 9. So this is a very fine blade, whereas a number 9 is going to be a more aggressive blade. So what I like to do is use my finer blades for thinner material, as well as smaller details, finer cuts, things like that, and I work my way up. So a number 9 is a very aggressive blade you can use if you're cutting like thick hardwoods, like walnut, oak, maple. The number 7 is great for stack cutting. If you put multiple layers together, you can use a little bit more aggressive blade to get through it. And my absolute favorite, and you can tell because it is the biggest pack here, is the number 5. If you're going to start with any blade, I would say grab the number 5. It is what I consider to be my all-purpose blade. And they come in these great value packs. So this is actually 144 blades in this pack, and you're going to get the best deal. All of these blades are the ones I prefer, which are the Pegasus brand modified geometry blades, with again the number 5 being my favorite all-purpose blade. But when it comes to the numbers, just keep in mind that kind of works your thinner material up to your thicker material as you advance in those numbers. And these are all reverse tooth blades. I prefer those. There are obviously other types of blades. You can get a double reverse tooth blade, a skip tooth blade, a spiral blade, and that's when it all starts to get just a little bit overwhelming. My goal on this video is to not overwhelm you and to just get you started cutting. So obviously explore different blades, but please go pick you up some of the number 5 modified geometry. Get you a number 7 for thicker cutting, and maybe a number 3 for some of your thinner stuff. And if you have these, which they also come in a sample pack with all of them, you are going to be well equipped and on your way to cutting, and you can explore more blades on your own later. The next step comes to templates. I get asked all the time, where are you getting your prints? Because this is obviously not done on a home printer, especially for some of those humongous logos. And I go to Staples, take your favorite print employee a Sonic drink and bribe them, make them your friend, and they will help you out with prints because the online ordering can be a bit confusing. So I actually just email my files to the direct print email. I'm sure wherever you go will have its own practices, but get to know them, tell them what you're doing. Generally, people want to help you out. So I send my prints there, send a bunch at a time, pick them up once a week. And that is how I am getting my large templates. But when it comes to applying it on the piece of wood, if you have ever struggled getting glue off, there is a little tip that will save your life. And I will show you that in just a second. I'm gonna cut this template out. You don't need all the excess. I give the print employees this border to use as sizing, and that kind of gets me where I need to be and helps them along. But I'm going to cut the good stuff out. So rather than directly sticking our paper to our material and then having to deal with peeling this off and sanding all this gunk off, there is a super cheap solution called contact paper. It is actually just a cheap kitchen shelf liner, I believe. So you can buy it at Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot. You can find it on Amazon. And this is going to act as a barrier between our spray adhesive and template. I'm gonna cut myself a little piece here. To size. And the trick to getting a good bond is to just remove the dust off your material as best you can. And if you're thinking, well, isn't this stuff sticky too? Yes, it is, but it is not near as sticky as the spray adhesive we actually use for our template. So the end result is pretty satisfying. Your template will peel off kind of like a sticker. Alternately, if you don't have contact paper or you just have a small piece that you need put on, apply some blue tape and that will do the same trick. But for larger things, a contact paper is definitely your cheaper method. So I'm just gonna trim some of this excess off. Nothing fancy. Get out our spray adhesive. Shake it up. And now we can take our template, apply it here, and use this to go scroll. And when it comes time to take it off, look how easy our template is going to remove. And this is a little bit more of an intermediate technique, but I kind of wanted to use a template that showed you guys all of it. This here, we're going to get a little bit of letter wrapping action. See how this lettering here is kind of wrapping into our thin lettering. If you've ever wondered how to do this, it's much simpler than you think. I start by actually lining the text up on my template how I want it to lay on my sign. That is step number 1, so there's no guessing, there's no laying a piece over and tracing it and trying to match your cut. Get your template where you want it. And then I like to look at the sizes. So wild was kind of the accent. I want that to stick up a little bit higher, so I know I'm going to want that to be a thicker material. And I'm gonna keep the bottom the thin 1/8 inch there. So we are now getting into stack cutting, and it is very simple. So I put my thickest piece at the bottom. I know that this is going to be the word wild. When I'm done, I'm going to remove this. No need to scroll all this extra bulk, that's why I put it on the bottom. And then the thinner will be left with our template already attached, and that's why we put that on the top. So to stack cut and get these pieces sandwiched together, more contact paper. So I'm gonna apply this to the back side here. And this is only because I want these to be different heights. You could still puzzle them together and have them the same height. That is just preference. I just want to take advantage and show you guys as many techniques as I can squeeze into this. Cut myself another piece. No need to put one obviously on the back. That's just going to be touching the plate of our scroll saw. And spray adhesive these together now too. I'll lay that right down there. And that is how you prep yourself for a stack cut, and we will get into multiple versions of stack cutting and their purposes a little bit later. But for now, we are on to drilling our pilot holes. There are a few things I wish I knew when I started scrolling, and one of them was to do your inner cuts first. So I'm gonna use a pretty small drill bit. Keep in mind your scroll blade is tiny, so no need for some huge bit. You'll be just fine with this guy. A nice little tip is to have a scrap surface. So if you've ever drilled through something and there's not something supporting it on the back, you're kind of gonna get that blowout and it's gonna be uneven scrolling surface for you. So set yourself some scrap here and drill your pilot hole. And because we did that, we still had a little bit, but I will sand that off and continue using this scrap board to kind of shoot through. And if you've ever got yourself into a situation where you're thinking, is this even worth cutting? I don't have a drill bit small enough. You do. There are the Mascot precision bits that you can buy from Bearwood Supply Company. There will also be an adapter. There's two different types. There is one for your regular drill and there is one for your rotary tool. So I'm gonna show you the one for the drill. It's very similar to how your drill works. You loosen one way to open it up and tighten to clamp down on your bit. So let me get these bits out and show you guys how teeny they really are. They go from this small to the biggest one is what I was previously using. But you can see with these bits, you will definitely be able to get into those hard to reach areas. But I'm going to use the second size down. I'm going to put it into my adapter here. Whoa. And tighten down. Because these also come with different collet sizes. Let me show you guys those. Learning as we go, keeping it real here. So unscrew the end. I know this seems like a lot of work, but this is how you're gonna get those small details. So if you've ever been intimidated or wondered how people are doing those things, this is your easy answer. So these are different collet sizes that will accept different size bits. I'm going to put this smaller one in. That should fix our slipping problem. Then we're going to put this into our drill. Tighten that up. And now we are equipped to get into these pieces. So now we've got the appropriate size bit to get into these spots as well. The first step is obviously to install our blade. Like I said, I'm using the number 5. It is my favorite general all-purpose blade here. If you're just looking at the teeth, this is a reverse tooth blade, so most of your teeth will be facing down and the bottom portion of your teeth facing up. Feed this through. You will see these clamps, and we are going to tighten these clamps down. My saw tensions a bit differently from yours. So mine actually has a tension knob at the back of my saw, which I have preset. If you're using like a DeWalt, and I'm not sure which other brands, your tension will probably be up here on a twist. But a general rule of thumb, you don't actually need your tension cranked as tight as you think. I like to keep my tension somewhere in the middle. So my blade is tight, but I hope you can see that there is still a little bit of flex. That's the sound I like to hear, and if you scroll, I know that you do this to your blade too. So if you're on the DeWalt, I would try looking at the 3.5 to 4 tension range, but over tightening it is going to cause a lot of snapping and breaking. But now this blade is installed and we are ready to get scrolling. So on the template here, I have drilled my pilot holes, and this is tip number 1, to cut your inner cuts first. On mine, I do this by raising my arm. One of the features of the Pegasus is that it actually raises and stays out of the way. Feed my blade through my pilot hole, bring this back down and reattach. Again, this might be different for your saw, but our goal here is to feed the blade through our pilot hole, tighten up, and we are going to cut this inner. When it comes to the speed, I like to go kind of fast, but you can slow it down. Slow it down as you're learning. Also, rule of thumb for the speed, if you're scrolling something very thin, you can turn your speed down to stop the blade from getting away from you, and then speed up as you get comfortable or as needed. So I'm gonna be in this range right here. Okay guys, so our blade is inserted and I am going to cut this inner out first. My second tip is to start your cut in the corner if possible. It saves you from having to feather your blade in and out along a curve or a straight side. You can just hide it into the corner. I know we're also just jumping right into scrolling lettering. Realistically, get you some practice sheets, some basic shapes, get comfortable with your tool, and then come back to this video and implement these tips. So let's start scrolling and head to this corner. So now we are inserted into our second pilot hole. I know we're jumping right into it, but the thing I want you to be focusing on here is the fact that we are headed to corners. Obviously, we couldn't help where we put the pilot holes, but I am going to go to the corners to start my cuts. We are cutting our inners first, and we will get into more techniques in just a moment. Okay, and now that our inner cuts are done, we can focus a little more on our scrolling technique. I just wanted you guys to have that takeaway, that is where you're starting, is by getting rid of the middle. We do that to keep stability, because imagine had you cut this piece out first and all you had to hold on to while you were scrolling was this tiny little D while you were trying to cut that out. That would have been super hard, so start with your inner cuts first. And now we will focus more on technique. I hope you can see when I'm scrolling that I kind of have a pivot hand and a driving hand. So I am usually holding my right hand to pivot when it comes to a curve or a corner, and my left hand is my general driving hand. And you'll see me kind of put this into place as we scroll. So let's just work our way around this letter. Go as slow as you need to. Focus on having one hand as your pivot and security and your other hand as the hand guiding your piece. When you're scrolling, if you're using an appropriate blade, you won't need to be forcing your piece through. So another tip is to really just let the blade do its work. There's no need to be actually pushing. Your job here is to really just be acting as a guide for your piece. So let's wrap our way around this letter. Here I held this hand as a pivot while I let my hand guide. And I'm going to do the same thing in this corner. Going to have a nice pivot while my other hand guides around. And this will keep my blade from just happy cutting forward if I have a nice solid hold and pivot with one of my hands while I'm guiding my piece. Okay, so you have cut around your piece successfully now. You can just go in and sand that little ridge where you start or stop. Or just kiss it along the edge of your blade and clean that up. But now we have successfully cut ourselves this letter. And the reason I am starting with wild is this is my thicker accent piece to this design. And you will just repeat those steps over these next letters, practicing that pivot point, practicing staying on the line or close to it. Sometimes you thicken things up if needed. Your best bet is to just keep scrolling. Don't worry about a mistake as it's happening and try to correct immediately. Just keep on going and get your final cut. So continue on through these letters, practicing that pivoting and just practicing guiding your piece through along the line. Another thing you want to keep in mind when you're working on your scrolls, after you cut your inner cuts and you're working your way around the letter, as you saw with the W, there's no need to be making breakaway cuts. And a breakaway cut is when you chip in and cut off the excess, and then cut off the excess and cut off the excess. That's gonna make your piece more and more fragile as you go around. And there is stability when you cut your piece as a whole. So I will show you what not to do, and then the good method of how to cut all the way around your letter. So those are breakaway cuts. And while it's not as important with this particular example, when you get to doing a really big name sign for one of your nursery rounds, you can start to see how if half of your lettering was free, it's going to be pretty loosey-goosey over here. So there's no need to be making these breakaway cuts and compromising the stability of your piece, especially when you're working on a larger cutout. The best method is going to be to cut the entire perimeter of your letter, which we will do with the D, and you will see how you have more area to put your hands while you're cutting and guiding. It's not going to be loose and fragile on the points, and that's going to give you a more stable cut. So let's cut this D out the proper way. So that is going to be your goal, is starting and finishing your cuts in one piece, and that will be even more important when you are doing larger cutouts. Help keep stability, and if needed, you can even place blue tape over some pieces, and you will have more surface area to work with and hold on to. So right here, we were working on our stack cut, and I mentioned that we were cutting the thicker part first. And the reason we put the thicker part on the bottom is we can simply pull our template free. We see how easy that was because we used the contact paper. And now we can focus on cutting these little things without having to cut needless bulk that we're not going to use for our sign. I am still on a number 5 blade, but this is very thin material, so this is a good time to switch your blade to something less aggressive. So we go down in number from a number 5. I think I'm gonna pop down to a number 3. So I'm gonna switch my blade out, and we will work on turning our corners sharply. Okay, so I'm going to go through and cut the inner of my letter out. And one thing I'm going to be focusing on trying to show you guys is how to not advance your cut while you're turning a corner. And one thing you need to keep in mind is obviously the teeth are on the front of your blade. And when you go to advance your cut, you are guiding your material into your blade. So you are moving forward. To not advance your cut, you're going to do the opposite, and you're going to pull on your blade to the back of your blade that doesn't have any teeth. So if I want to move forward, I'm pushing on my blade, and if I want to stop my cut while I'm turning a corner, I'm actually going to be pulling ever so slightly on my blade. You can kind of see it in action here. So that sound was us cutting into our blade, and you'll hear it as we move forward, and that sound is going to stop when I apply the opposite pressure, which seems silly now, but when we turn a corner, it will start to make sense to you. So we're going to move forward, and then you will see me do the opposite motion down here in the corner of this letter. So here I am stopping my teeth at the corner of this cut, just to show you guys that that's my goal, to cut into the corner. And while your blade is still going, you're going to work on turning, and the way you're going to stop from your cut just coming all the way out here is to pull on that blade ever so slightly against the back, keeping pressure back here versus on the front while you turn. So as I turn, I'm going to be pulling against the back of my blade, move forward, pull against the back of my blade while I turn, and move forward. And that's going to be easier for you guys to see on the outside of the letters and practice that technique, and I hope it starts to make a little bit more sense. So cut forward, turn, pulling against the back of the blade while you turn the corner, and again start to push forward. Stop here, pull against the back of my blade while I turn, then start cutting forward. Stop here, pull against the back of my blade while I turn, move forward. Again, pull against the back of your blade and then move forward. So you'll actually hear when the blade is cutting versus when I'm slightly pulling and it stops cutting as I turn these corners. Moving forward versus when I'm pulling on the back of my blade. Now it starts cutting again. a slight pull, and turn. So now we get to do the fun part, which is peeling our template, and look how easy that comes off because we used contact paper. Now obviously we do the prep of sanding to get ready for paint, but we don't have to spend forever sanding spray adhesive off our delicate scrolls. Okay, so this is why we stack. This is one thing that stacking will do for you if you're wondering how to puzzle in layers of different heights. We cut our wild first, removed our thicker layer, cut the bottom thinner layer, and now these will just puzzle perfectly back together because we stacked them to cut, and there is no guessing on how these will fit back into place. And that's what stack cutting will do for you, get you these perfect puzzle cuts. I had so much fun with you guys today. I hope you picked up some good tips and tricks on how to get started. If you take away anything from these tutorials, it is don't limit yourself to thinking you have to have all of the tools to begin. Just start, have fun, practice away, and with time you will just keep getting better and better. If you do shop any of the supplies that I've used today from Bare Woods, you can use the code TIMBER to save on certain items on their website. So happy shopping with them and happy scrolling.